All right, our next question will come from Bill Miller and go first to Jonathan Dine.
The U.S. Postal Service is very important to most of the people in this room today. It is now trying to go into a program that would, it's an advertising program that would compete and be unfair to newspapers. In many cases, the newspaper is the largest customer for the post office in the community. And what I'd like to know is what is your position on this issue and the other issues of closing rural post offices and eliminating Saturday delivery? What's your position on this? What would you do in the Senate to help rural newspapers and community newspapers that depend on the Postal Service?
Like many of the things run by the government, the Postal Office is one of them that's very inefficient. I have a friend who works for the Post Office as a mail carrier. He gets 4 days straight of 10 hours a day, so that every day, every time he's needed, he gets more overtime. So the federal government, instead of hiring, or the Postal Service, instead of hiring new individuals, will prefer to pay double time or time and a half to one individual, wasting more money instead of hiring more people and creating more jobs. I think that the Postal Service should cut costs if it's to remain around. We need to maybe even increase the price of a stamp, and I would be in favor of closing Postal Service on Saturday. We are in a fiscal crisis. We do need to make some tough choices, and if one of them is cutting back on some of the services, we can wait till Monday to receive our mail.
Todd Akin.
Well, let me say, first of all, the Postal Service is something that's constitutional. Government's supposed to be doing that. And I think all of you have grown up knowing the postman. You hope he's going to bring a letter from somebody special, or you're expecting a package that you ordered and you're waiting and just hoping that the postman's going to bring it. And I think there's some of the just sort of a part of American tradition. But there is a principle involved here, and that is, I think that the best way when the government's doing something is to have each thing sit on its own base. That way we all know that we're not transferring money from one thing to another thing or covering up something. So I believe that the Postal Service needs to be following that kind of principle, and that is the amount of money that's being charged in stamps, and the service that they provide needs to match the cost of providing those services. And that's the best way to solve this and all kinds of other questions. That's one of the reasons why, for instance, we have a gasoline tax, because the gasoline tax pays for the roads. If you don't want to pay the gasoline tax, don't buy so much gasoline. And so things sit on their own base. And I believe that's probably the best principle overall to deal with the questions in the post office. Thank you.
Claire McCaskill.
I'm going to try to quote Todd Akin exactly on this. I think he said, we can keep raising the prices, and if they get too high, the private sector can take over. I disagree. It is in the Constitution, and I will tell you, we have had the finest and the most reliable and the most comprehensive and universal postal service in the world. They have cut billions in expenses over the last several years. They have shrunk their workforce. They have become much more efficient. But what they've been required to do is pre-fund their pensions and health care for 75 years. No one in the private sector is required to pre-fund their pensions and health care for 75 years. No one in the governmental sector, except the post office, is required to do that. And it's got them into a cash flow problem. We have to uncuff them and allow them to be more entrepreneurial, particularly when it comes to the growth area of Postal Service, which is package delivery. And I will tell you, Mr. Miller, you know this, and many in this audience know this because you're from rural communities. A rural post office is more than bricks and mortar. I grew up, as a daughter of rural Missouri, I grew up in Houston and Lebanon, Missouri. I still remember where the post offices were in those communities because it's a place that the community came together and felt united. And 6-day delivery is important in rural Missouri for seniors that need their medicine, for businesses that must utilize the Postal Service in order to exist in rural Missouri. The bill is bipartisan. It saves money. It is in the Senate. And Congressman Akin is part of the gridlock that won't pass it. I would ask you, Congressman Akin, go back to Washington. Stop campaigning. Go back to Washington and help us pass the postal bill.
Congressman Akin, would you like a rebuttal time?
I think that's a good idea. First of all, I think I heard what the answer was. Well, if you can't make the thing work, well, we'll just take some money from somewhere else to help pay for it. I don't know that that's a very responsible solution. And the idea of the fact that the rural post offices are important, I never said they weren't important. I think they're great. But I think the point of the matter is there has to be some kind of fiscal responsibility. And it's not responsible to say, take all of the stuff that you want and we're just going to somehow make money up here. That's where we're going, and because of policies like that and thinking like that from Claire McCaskill, that's why we're running over $1 trillion that we don't have, trying to spend it every year. And you want to talk about gridlock, let's talk about the Senate. It is completely stuck. It hasn't done any budget for 1,200 days.
Senator McCaskill, your rebuttal time.
Let me just tackle the budget real quickly. And by the way, this bill is fiscally responsible to save the post offices. It doesn't take any tax dollars. It continues to make the post office reliant on their income. But on the budget, Congressman Akin knows that last summer, instead of passing a resolution that the appropriators absolutely ignore every year, the only way you spend money in Washington is with an appropriations bill. It's not the budget resolution. All the budget resolution does is advisory, and appropriators usually ignore it, as Todd knows. We passed a law last year, signed into law, that limited the size of the budget for 2 years. And it actually says in the law, if you go to mccaskill.senate.gov, you can read it, that this will substitute for the budget resolutions for 2 years. We did that because we wanted to put a lid on the appropriators and keep that spending down as a matter of law for 2 years. This is a political talking point, and it's an unfair one.